So obviously it's Friday. I'm sure I'll be doing a video later on what the elections were, what happened, and the breakdown, everything. I know that the result for the Tees Valley mayoral election isn't happening till about 12:30 today, so that is very likely to happen in about 30 minutes' time. That may very well be today's later video, as well as a full breakdown of everything else that happened during last night. And no doubt, of course, on this Saturday's Good Morning Walk, we will be talking about all that again in a bit more depth of more stuff that has no doubt broken in the meantime. Probably a lot of Tories cursing Rishi Sunak, and of course, maybe even the fate of Rishi Sunak if it has been decided by then. Who knows? Expect possibly, I would predict a vote of no confidence in some way, shape, or form. I can very, very, very easily see that possibly happening. Maybe Rishi will win it. I think he ultimately will win it. But of course, as we've said and we have seen before in the past, if prime ministers have to face, or even governments have to face, votes of no confidence, their survival after, unless they do something drastic to really change, is very, very, very much in doubt. So, like I say, I'm doing this on sort of Tuesday, just after sort of 1 o'clock. So we still obviously don't know what is going to be happening. People are going to be out and voting, but expect me to go and be talking more all about that, not only in later video, but of course, like I say, on the Good Morning Walk tomorrow. So do feel free to come and join us for that tomorrow. But of course, as always, you can obviously during that time, please do remember to click the like, the share button, the links down below, the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club down below as well. So thank you very much to everyone who is helping and helping support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. It all helps. So what are we talking about today in abstention of all this? Well, I think one of the big things to talk about is, of course, wealth taxing. This is easily one of, if not the most biggest hot topics there is, and is going to be around the idea of wealth taxing wealth, and at least making sure that people are being taxed, I think, in a far more fair way. We are entering into a obvious age, and everyone can see it, of where we have, ever increasing, smaller, sort of shrinking budgets, with more demands on societal needs for social health care, you name it, etc. Investment into help sort of rebuilding the economy, very, very much needed. The big question is, where do we get all this wealth from as well? I've said it before. I think in the UK, we have for quite a while been taxed a lot lower than, should we say, our European counterparts. I can easily see taxes for everyone, I think, at the moment, probably going up across the board into help to pay for a lot of this. But ultimately, when Rachel Reeves is looking around for money, and she's already announced this, that they are going to sort of try and close more and more tax loopholes, ultimately, she will be left with one very simple and ultimately one probably incredibly popular opinion. And that is to go after all the billionaires and millionaires and tax people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk their fair share. They have amassed huge amounts of wealth on this. And yet, we need money to sort of build roads, build HS2, all these things, run the NHS. And yet, the money is there. We could finally tax it. And I've said before, there are other ways to sort of do a wealth tax. As much as I do agree with the idea of the wealth tax, I think before a guy called Richard Murphy runs a fantastic blog. He did an entire piece on this about what you could tax instead of just doing a wealth tax, the differences in and around that wealth tax you could do. So we'll see what happens, but there's lots of different reasons you can do it. A dividends tax, taxing shares would be sort of an interesting idea to sort of do. That would be certainly quite successful, I think. But one thing in particular we've got to look at is what is happening with Brazil, because Brazil have decided, or at least putting forward, a very, very ambitious proposal for what is essentially an annual global tax levied at 2% on the wealth of the world's billionaires. So you are taxing essentially 2% just on billionaires. So plan has been drawn up by a French economist called Gabriel Zuckerman, who's been asked to draw up these details on how all this would work. And he says that this would probably bring in, hang on, let me get to it. So this alone would raise about 250 billion a year. 250 billion a year. That is a lot of money that we can see and that we can take. And ultimately, I think you are going to be seeing that. You are obviously going to be seeing that going after that. But obviously, you've got to see that, you know, the billionaires and are going to sort of fight back against this. Of course, Musk is going to deploy something. Of course, there is going to be something pushed back against this. There's a really, really interesting quote as well, sort of about sort of, you know, sort of taxing people, or at least comparing tax to goose plucking. You know, if you are plucking feathers from a goose, you've got to try and get as many feathers as you can from the goose before the goose with the least amount of hissing. And I think ultimately this plan will attract a lot of hissing. Now, I've said before, I think that there are a lot better ways to sort of tax wealth. Like I say, go read Professor Richard Murphy's blog. He talks about all this, all the different ways we can tax this, a lot more better ways than doing something like this. But you are going to get, you know, a lot of money for this. And in an ever increasing time where we are seeing, you know, shrinking budgets and increase need to sort of, well, borrow more money. Why borrow it when we can maybe, you know, tax the people who are sitting on a quite a large amount of money to sort of, you know, go get that money. It does make more and more sense. I think ultimately this is something that Rachel Reeves is going to do. It is going to be incredibly popular with a lot of voters up and down the country, because all you have to say, hey, someone like Jeff Bezos, etc., these 3,000 billionaires around the world are sitting on a whole astronomical size of money that could help sort of fund the NHS, help fund your public council services, help fund, you know, the social services that, you know, people are needing in their older age, that we are sort of seeing those numbers ever increase, help to fund, you know, more schools, etc., etc. Ultimately, it is easily, I think, quite simply the easier to sell in history to do this. It's whether or not the way that we see this done. As I've said before, go look at Professor Richard Murphy's tax blog. He's sort of laid out a lot of the different ways that we can do this and tax wealth in a lot of other different ways. Because ultimately, if Brazil does do this, there are obviously ways that you might see these people try to sort of get around via doing this. And we've seen them do that before. We've talked about if you did deploy a wealth tax, there is the obvious example that they would pay for accountants to try and find ways to get around that. So even if you did sort of get this off in the first year, you might get 250 billion the first year. The next year you might only get 200, and then it might go down and down and down as more they find more ways to essentially avoid and new loopholes to avoid paying this new global tax. Will it work? Will it not? Expect, I think, a lot of noise about this from these types of people in the future. But ultimately, I can see this is something that we are really going to have to get to grips with. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. Please do remember to leave a like and share button, of course, as well before you go. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.